And Hamas has accused Israel of blocking a ceasefire, saying Netanyahu's government has inserted new conditions into the proposal at the latest talks. Is that your assessment as well? And this comes after Netanyahu's visit to D.C., where U.S. officials emphasized the importance of a ceasefire. So are you concerned about the timing?
So I'm not going to get into the specifics of the negotiating process, and certainly not going to negotiate from up here. There are a number of complicated details that need to be worked out, and I'm not going to outline those publicly. But again, we think a deal is both achievable and we think it's urgent. And as we have said previously and consistently, there has been a deal that was on the table, and Hamas needs to accept that deal. And we expect these conversations to keep on going.
Has Israel inserted new conditions?
Again, I'm just not going to speak to the negotiation process from here. Jenny.
Following up on Daphne's questions on Lebanon, has the U.S. specifically warned Israel against striking Beirut as it's part of its response?
I'm not going to speak to specific diplomatic engagements, Jenny. First and foremost, let me just reiterate what I've said previously, is that Israel has a right to defend itself against terrorism. We are continuing to engage, and we're continuing to seek a durable diplomatic solution that ends all types of cross-border fire, and it makes it possible for those who are displaced on both sides to return home. That is our priority.
Does the U.S. consider striking Beirut within the right to defend itself, given the potential for escalation?
This is that's just a hypothetical, Jenny. We're not going to get ahead of that process. What we're focused on right now is engaging in a diplomatic conversation with both sides. Our priority is creating the conditions so that civilians on both sides of the borders can safely return home.
What is the department's understanding, including through the secretary's engagements, of how much of Israel's retaliatory response we've already seen? Were the strikes this weekend the beginning, the middle, the end?
I'm just not going to speculate on that, Olivia, and that's something I will leave it to our Israeli partners and the IDF to speak to. What I can say is that what the United States is squarely focused on, which is one, ensuring that we come to some kind of durable diplomatic solution that will allow civilians in both Israel and Lebanon to be able to safely return home. That's what our priority is. We'll also continue to remain engaged with officials in Lebanon as well as officials in Israel as well.
I mean, the Prime Minister said that the response is coming and it will be severe, indicating that there may be more to come. Is the U.S. preparing for that kind of a scenario?
We are engaging with the relevant entities continuously, as well as continuing to remain focused on a durable diplomatic solution. I'm not going to get ahead of what's going to happen here or try to speculate or preview. First and foremost, again, we strongly condemn this attack that struck the soccer field, but beyond that, we're continuing to engage to ensure that there is some kind of durable diplomatic solution. And I'm just not going to get ahead of that.
Okay, and so on hostage talks, just to circle back, because, I mean, they took place in Rome. We know it was publicly reported. They broke up within a matter of hours with the Mossad director returning to Israel without an apparent breakthrough. I know you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, but Hamas said that new conditions have been placed on the table by Israel. Is that inaccurate in your view?
You are exactly right that I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty and outline the details of these negotiations publicly. I'll echo what I just said to Daphne, what you've heard Matt say as recently as last week. We are hopeful about the developments and the progress that is being made. These are processes that are ongoing. We believe a deal is both achievable and urgent. There are, of course, a number of complicated details that continue to need to be worked out, but I'm not going to get into them specifically from up here. That would be unhelpful for the process. What I can say is that there has been too much suffering for far too long, and we believe that it's time for this war to end. We think that a ceasefire can unlock a great deal. We think it creates the ability for the remaining hostages, to be returned home, including the remaining Americans. We believe that it creates the conditions so that an additional influx of humanitarian aid can make its way into Gaza to help address the dire circumstances in Gaza. And perhaps most importantly, it creates the condition that will allow relevant actors to have serious diplomatic conversations about the region's future and get us out of these endless cycles of violence. That's what we think is at stake, and that's what we're going to continue to work towards. But I know that there is a lot of interest in the details and the negotiations and the back and forth, and I'm just not going to get into those publicly.
Sure, it's just for consistency, because
sure,
you and Matt and other U.S. officials have not hesitated to say when the ball is in Hamas's court. So I'm just wondering whose court the ball is in now. I mean, U.S. officials last week went to great lengths to stress how much they were dialing up the pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu. The deal is closable, it needs to be closed, subject to some implementation issues. So who is causing the hang up now?
I'm not going to get into, again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the negotiations, but let's look at this from a little bit of a wider lens and take a step back here. Consistently, since when I believe it was about a month and a half ago, when President Biden went into the Roosevelt Room and laid out the contours of this proposal that had been on the table, this proposal that Israel had agreed to, that Arab partners had agreed to, that the United Nations had supported, that the UN Security Council had supported, time and time again, it continued to be Hamas that changed pieces of the deal and changed pieces of the proposal. So this is a process that is ongoing, and we're going to continue to work with through this process, and I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Okay, I mean, you just said Hamas changed the conditions without saying who is changing the conditions now, but I understand we may not get an answer on this. One more just on the vice president's comments last week, because some far-right officials in Israel took issue with those comments, saying she was calling for a truce or a surrender. Do you have any response to, I think it was Ben-Gvir and Smotrich who came
well, look, I think it's pretty clear that those are characterizations that very much takes the vice president's comments out of context. The vice president was clearly stating what has been this administration's position, that a ceasefire is of utmost importance and that it can unlock a great deal. Some of the things that I just spoke about, the release of American hostages, the influx of humanitarian aid, and that's why we think this is something that is timely, it needs to be urgent, and it's something that needs to be prioritized. Zaid, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for walking in late, but just to follow up on Olivia's point. I mean, you in the past, you or Matt did not hesitate in saying that the ball was in Hamas's court. Why this time around you are unwilling to say who is, standing in the way of arriving at a deal? Because there are all kinds of reports that Mr. Netanyahu has had a change of heart. He actually agreed to something, then he changed his mind.
So I'm not gonna get into a back and forth on hearsay and what may or may not be true when it comes to public reporting or not. What I can say is this, Saeed, is that these are negotiations, these are processes that are ongoing. We're going to continue to be engaged in those efforts. There continue to be a number of details and issues that need to be worked out, but we continue to believe that a deal is achievable. Not only is it achievable, but for all the reasons that I laid out, coming to a deal should be of utmost importance. And it is true that at various times throughout this process, Saeed, Hamas has changed the goalposts. It has changed conditions. That has been true without us getting into the specifics of the negotiations process, which I'm not going to get into now.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the Israeli government or Mr. Netanyahu has not changed position from the original
I'm just not speaking to the specifics.
That was announced by the President of the United States on May 31.
I'm not speaking to the specifics of the negotiations.
Right. Okay, just a couple